So slightly delayed upload this week. I was in New York all last week doing a Spitfire event. So let's leap straight in. I'm going to talk about my favorite plugins today, just a few of them, and just show you how I use them to create a few interesting sounds. So the first one I'm going to talk about is one I've mentioned before. It's Black Hole. I really love this on piano. It gives you that really great kind of stretched, wavy kind of sound. And it can give you a real kind of feeling of intensity and maybe kind of a kind of enveloped emotional kind of sensation. So just check out this. It's got real character, and that's what I like in a plugin. So let's have a look at something else. Okay, so I've loaded up Andy Finden's contrabass flute from the Andy Finden kit bag, and I've got this running through a sequence of 3 plugins. I'm going to quickly play it, and then we'll go in and look at what each plugin is adding to the chain. Right, so I've gone here for a really kind of beautifully kind of echoey sound, but I really wanted to get the kind of grungy, spitty kind of noise really up front and in your face. I wanted it to be quite even. I didn't want lots and lots of dynamics in there, so that when I hit the really chiffy sound, it doesn't kind of totally overpower what else is going on in the track. So the first thing, let's turn some of these off. Here's the sound raw. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm putting on this UAD plugin. It's an 1176, which is a really great characterful limiting amplifier compressor. So the first thing this is doing is it's taking off the really hard chiff for me and pulling that right back down, and it's also bringing up the grit in the sound quite a bit. I've got it set quite hard, so if I just play a gentle note, you can see it's already pulling maybe 2 dBs out of this. So you can see that I've got it set with quite a fast attack and quite a fast release. Now on this unit, the attack, you set that to a low number to get a fast attack, and slightly counterintuitively you set the release to a high number. I'll show you. You can see that's reacting very quickly. If I pull the release right down, it takes a long time for the release to come up. I don't want to get that sound where the chiff pulls everything down for a while and it gradually comes back up. I want this to react very fast to the incoming audio. I've got the input set quite high to drive it quite hard, and so correspondingly the output is set reasonably low. And I'm only using a ratio of 4, so it's not going to sound too extreme. It's just going to give me that beautiful kind of compression. So next up is FabFilter's Saturn plugin. This is a saturation and distortion plugin. It just gives you those warmth, the harmonics, and a kind of fatness to the sound. And I've got this set. I'm not using any of the feedback or any of that kind of thing. As you can see on the tone controls, I've got a bit of a smiley face there, and I'm also using a little bit of extra presence. And I'm driving it. So this is without the Saturn. And plugging it in. Now the first obvious thing is it's a tiny bit louder, but I hope that you can also hear that it's really kind of, it's almost like the old Aphex Oral Exciter. It's giving you that extra drive, some harmonics, some extra kind of bright, crispy content in there. So the final thing I've got in the chain here is another FabFilter plugin, Timeless. This is giving me some nice delays. I've got it set so I've got a crotchet delay on one side on the left and then a quaver delay on the right. So if I give you a quick tap with that. So you hear first right, left, and then it starts to go round and round, and we've got a little bit of kind of crossfeed going If you check out the feedback controls here, you can see that we are sending the left and right channels into each other a little bit, so we're getting that kind of lovely kind of swimming sound. So let me play first without that, and then let's stick it in. So that's using a couple of my favorite plugins to give just a little bit of extra zhuzh to a sound that I love, the performance. But this is really just bringing out some of the extra character and all of the grit and beauty in the performance. So let's move on to some cellos. Now I want to make a kind of evolving-y type of synth pad with a little bit of grumbliness in it. But I want to use these long, soft consordinos, these muted cellos, with this huge number of cellos. I've picked some mics that will give me some width from the outriggers, and if you remember, these are the mics that are at the same vertical level as the tree, but they're out at the sides, same plane, but they're right out there, so you get the real kind of spread of sound. But I'm also using a mid set of mics that give me a little bit of kind of intensity within the sound. Now I'm going to play the whole thing first, just to show you what it is, and then we'll go back to the source sound and break down what each plugin is doing. So you can hear there's quite a lot of interesting stuff going on in that sound. Let's take it right back to the top and listen to the sound just on its own, just raw. So it's a nice sound. You can hear that we've got a nice balance of the width and also of the kind of intimacy of getting those mid stage mics in. What are we doing first? So let's put these in some kind of order so you can see what I'm doing. So first up, I'm using Neve EQ. So there's really just two things I'm doing with this EQ. I'm taking a little shelf at the bottom end just to remove a little bit of the ambient noise in the hall, because that's going to mess up what I'm sending in. You'll see that I'm doing a bit of pitch shifting, and I don't want to get that sound into my string sound. So I'm losing some of the kind of low end sound from the cellos, and it'll also helpfully get rid of any kind of rumbly sound that you might have from just the mass of people all living and breathing in that hall. I'm also putting a teensy weensy little bit of top end on, just a tiny bit of a high frequency shelf there. So the difference there is, I'll just play it very quickly without. And with. So a fairly subtle difference, but you can hear it's just shifting the sound very slightly towards the top end. So next in line, I'm using an old plugin called Doubler. It's one of the Waves plugins. It's an old favorite of mine. This enables you to add pitch shift voices to your signal. Now I'm using it in quite an unusual way. I've got all of the voices going. I'm spreading them around a bit and detuning them, but I'm also shifting them all down by an octave. So let me show you what that sounds like. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch it on. I'm going to take all the voices off and just play the direct sound. And now let's add those 4 voices back in. If I play one single note, you can hear what's going on there. You're getting a kind of spread, and you're getting those interesting tuning things. They're modulating a tiny bit as well. So it's giving you a really kind of organic and sound. It's adding an extra bit of movement into the sound. Now the next thing is Eventide Octavox. Again, it's a harmonizer type plugin. This is quite an interesting one. I've got some kind of nice spread of the voices here. I've got 8 voices going, and I've got a time delay between each of the voices coming in, a little bit of feedback, and you can see from the notation grid here what's happening with these voices. So I'm starting, if you like, I'm starting at the first harmonic, or the octave harmonic, and then I'm spreading up and down from there. So I'm kind of adding again another octave below. So this is really widening the frequency range of the sound that I'm putting into it. So really expanding it out. So here it is without. And let's add it. So you can hear there, we're not going for kind of like crazy, blast it out harmonizer thing that's you can hear really, really clearly shifting your notes. But what it is doing is it's adding all around the sound that you're sending into it. It's adding a little cloud, a kind of shimmery cloud of harmonics related to the notes that you're playing. If I just play one note and I'll switch it in. So you hear there with one note, you can hear it quite clearly. When you're playing a chord, it kind of obfuscates it a little bit. But you're really getting that kind of breadth of sound. Now, the final element to the sound is to put some tail on it. And for this, I'm using the warm cathedral setting in the VSS3, which is one of my favorite plug-in reverbs. I've taken the decay up to 6 seconds to give it a really nice long tail. You can see that I'm using, I've put the dry level into this, so I'm blending it because we've got this plug-in, in the channel. We're not sending to this, we're using it in the channel. So I'm balancing it so that I'm getting a little bit less of the dry signal compared to the combined early reflections and reverb level of the warm cathedral sound. I don't think I've done anything else to change that. I think everything else is just the setting as it comes up. But here's what it sounds like with that warm cathedral. So that gives you a really lovely characterful sound. And just to remind you again, let me just turn all of these plugins off. And what we had originally. And then going back to our sound. So that's one way to take this very organic string sound and create a really interesting pad from it. Kind of synthy sound, which has got lots of texture and lots of movement in it. Okay, so the final sound I'm going to show you today is, I like to call it a kind of crystal harp. And I want to take a nice close harp signal and I want to turn it into this really bright, tinkly kind of fantasy sound. So here's what it sounds like. So we've got tons of character and color in that sound. Let's go back to the source and then we'll see what each of these plugins is doing in the signal chain. First up, we have our harp. It's a straightforward normal. And I'm using it, I'm deliberately not pedaling down. To get the open sound, I want to get the muted, because I love the sound of the fingers going back onto the strings. Just going to add little scatters of interest as I sound design this sound into what I'm trying to get to at the end. I'm only using the close sound so that I can get a really direct, nice, clear crystal sound here. So first up, we add Manly Massive Passive, a Massive Passive fabulous EQ. And here I'm really just doing a smiley face. You can see that I've got, so I've switched in the bottom and the top frequencies from both sides. The bottom one I've got set to 150 hertz, and I'm boosting it a reasonable amount. It's set to a shelf and not a bell sound, which is obviously very useful at the extremes of the ends of the spectrum. And I've got it set roughly in the middle in terms of the Q, so it's just a relatively gentle boost. It's not particularly punchy around the 150 mark, but it's just giving you a little bit of bottom end. And over here, I've got this set to 8K2, 8200, and again, it's a kind of reasonably wide, gentle shelf, and I've got that really pumped up to the max, so really boosting that to the top end. And one of the things I love about this, and about the original unit itself, which sounds different to this, but it sounds fabulous, obviously. This also sounds fabulous. It's not exactly the same, but one thing that it does manage to do is it manages to let you boost really dramatically without kind of breaking up into kind of horribly digital sounding artifacts and or weird colors and stuff like that. So let's hear it without, and then with. So you can hear there, we've really got all of the nuance from the high end of the sounds, the finger noises and all that kind of stuff. Really great. And just giving a little bit of that bottom thump as well, so that any of those noises that we're picking up, the fingers going back on, or any plucks that have some nice low frequency content, we're accenting those as well. So next up in the chain is an old favorite. Again, it's an Eventide H3000 plugin, and I'm using the string thickener setting on this. Don't think I've changed anything on this. I think this is just maybe the mix, obviously. It comes up with 100%, so you need to pull that down as you're using the plugin in line rather than sending to it. So I've got the mix set to about 30%, but apart from that, I think, you know, it might have boosted the output a little bit. But apart from that, it's basically just as it is. That does this. Switch it in. So you can hear that it's kind of just, it's almost like just a kind of doubling. There's a little bit of pitchiness going on. You can see the settings here in these two modulating pitch shift controls. And also you've got an additional delay to the left side as well. There is some delay going on here anyway in the pitch shift. But it's a relatively simple thing. But it gives you the starting thing for what I'm going to do next. And next up is the random hall. Now, I've got this set with quite a large pre-delay, and we talked about pre-delay in my film about reverb, but I want to get that distance between these lovely kind of crunchy little delay flam things and the onset of the reverb, which I'm using a modulated reverb here, the random hall, and I'm setting it to quite a long reverb time, nearly 5 seconds. I don't think I've turned the diffusion up, so I'm getting a nice extra bit of blur, and I've set the mix level here to 38%. So without, and then with. So that gives you a really nice clean sound, a very, very smooth sound. There's one extra thing that I wanted to add to this sound, and I've got that going here in Altiverb. Now, what I want to have on here is I want to have a nice, long, smooth tail. I'm going to modulate that tail, and then I'm also going to pass through the direct signal as well. So I'm adding another tail, but I've got a really lovely long tail here. And you can see that we're kind of heading into the 10-second territory. So here's the sound without. And if we add in this one, so that's my final sound. And again, let's just nip back and have a listen to the sound as it is with no plugins. And then if we add everything back in. So what I'm trying to get across here is I'm trying to make a character of the sound. So I could just go, oh, I've got this harp and I'll just stick a massive reverb on it and that'll do. But actually it's these tiny little things that you do in addition to just what might be the most obvious thing that gives you a sound with real character. And having those little bits of modulation, picking out the some of the imperfections in the sound and making a feature of them, like the real breathiness in the contrabass flute, spitty sounds, and the finger thumps in this harp, and just trying to accentuate all of that stuff is the thing that really, I feel, gives you the most character in sounds when you're doing this sound designing, because that's all it is. You're basically, in the same way that people sound design for films or for TV, you're taking a sound that just happens to be a musical instrument, and you're coming up with an interesting character for that sound, and then you're playing through it. And I think that doing this, the more time you get to do these kind of things on your tracks, the more character you infuse into the tracks and the more interesting they are to listen to. So those are a few of my favorite plugins and how I tend to use them. I hope some of that's been useful. I'll put some links below for all of these plugins so that you can have a look at them online and check them out. I hope some of this has been useful. If you like what I'm doing, then please hit like. And if you want to see when I put up a new video, hit the bell sign and please subscribe. And I will keep trying to put out some useful information for you guys. Okay, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.